Hi, my name's Catherine from Crime Psych. In this video, I'm going to be giving a psychological analysis of Thomas Donald Bruce McArthur, who is commonly known as Bruce McArthur. He was convicted of a number of murders in Canada in January 2019. McArthur killed 8 people and is the most prolific known serial killer to have been active in Toronto and is the oldest known serial killer in Canada. McArthur and many of his victims were active on online dating apps for men who had sex with other men, where McArthur stated that he wanted to meet submissive men. Before I go on to talk about the murders and the psychology behind it, I think it's maybe a bit useful to tell you a little bit about Bruce McArthur's background. So, who is this Bruce McArthur? He was born in Ontario in Canada in 1951. He was born and raised in a rural area and his parents had a farm. He had one sister, however his parents fostered troubled children from Toronto and they often had between 6 and 10 children in their care at any given time, but they had a really good reputation in the area. He attended a small school and his classmates have since commented that they thought that he was trying to be the teacher's pet. He would tell the teacher about some of the mischief some of the other boys had been up to, that he never got along with some of the boys there. He won a few singing competitions at school and was generally quite well behaved. His mother was an Irish Catholic and his father was a Scottish Presbyterian, and both were very devout in their religion. And this did cause some arguments within the home, but McArthur would always side with his mother. His father is said to have been very strict. So far, there's nothing unusual about his upbringing that would suggest that he'd go on to commit a number of murders. McArthur knew that he was homosexual. However, he met and married Janice and they had one son and one daughter together. As a travelling salesman, he was able to begin to engage with other men and he eventually came out to his wife. They stayed together for a while but did eventually end up getting divorced. After the couple had split up, McArthur frequented gay bars and villages and ended up in a 4-year relationship with a man. He did see a psychiatrist after that relationship and after his divorce was final and was on Prozac for depression. And this is when he began working as a landscaper. Their son, Todd, had been making obscene phone calls to women that he didn't know. If Bruce himself had struggled with dealing with the fact that he was gay, it's very unsurprising that other family members would also find it difficult to understand and accept. In 2014, Todd was sentenced to 14 months in jail for making multiple obscene phone calls. When he was released on bail, he was ordered to stay at his father's apartment and assist with Bruce McArthur's landscaping business. A former friend of Todd's is reported to have said that the bathroom wall was covered in pictures of naked men with erections. He said that most of the men appeared to be East Indian, and Todd had said that these were men whom his father knew. McArthur didn't hide the fact. He laughed about it over breakfast. And I would imagine that a young teenage boy who was struggling to accept his father as being gay would find living in these conditions incredibly difficult. I would be asking myself why any parent would have pictures of naked people on the walls with their children around. And that's regardless of their sexual orientation. To me, it seems as though McArthur is acting out. After so many years of hiding being gay, he was now very open about it. And this just gives you a little bit about his background and who he is. He was possibly doing a bit of attention seeking in his behaviours. McArthur was arrested in January 2018 after the police connected him with 2 missing people. However, he'd previously been convicted of a serious assault on a man that he met on a dating website. His first crime was to attack a man that he'd met for sex. He'd survived and McArthur was convicted, but he avoided jail. He was known in the gay village and on several dating websites. He was also known for having quite violent outbursts, and this indicates to me that there is some unsuppressed anger and rage which is beginning to leak out. By acting out in a violent way towards other homosexuals, he's subconsciously attacking himself and his own sexuality. At the age of 66, he was connected to a number of disappearances in the gay community, which then led the police to set up surveillance on him. McArthur was subsequently arrested in January 2018 and pleaded guilty to 8 counts of murder in April 2018. During that investigation, the police found dismembered body parts from several men buried in planters. He and all his victims had met via a gay dating app. McArthur had stated on his profile that he wanted to meet submissive men. And this to me is a fairly chilling detail, because he obviously knew he was going to kill these men, and by asking for submissive men, he knew that he was going to be able to tie them up or handcuff them or restrain them easily. McArthur had targeted vulnerable men who either didn't have a fixed address or hadn't told their families that they were gay. And again, this indicates that he's attacking his own sexuality. He had a resentment about being gay. However, once he came out, he was very sexually active. And this doesn't mean that he was completely comfortable with who he was. When you do consider his strict religious upbringing and his parents' views on homosexuality, it's perhaps a little bit unsurprising that he does struggle with this so much. McArthur had a total of 3 interactions during his killing spree. However, he was released each time. And this in itself is likely to have given him a great sense of confidence that he was able to carry on getting away with these murders. He'd known some of his victims for quite a few years before killing them. A friend of one of the victims had said that he was really angry with himself for not seeing McArthur for what he was. And this suggests that he hid behind a mask of normality. He was able to interact in a normal way and fit in with society. He was even Santa at the local mall on one occasion. He was able to fit in and suppress the rage and anger that he was experiencing and outwardly present himself in a decent way. And that in itself is a fairly manipulative trait. There were a couple of victims who escaped from McArthur before he was able to kill them. One victim was invited into the back of his van, presumably just for casual sex. McArthur had told him to get into the back of the van and lay on top of a fur coat, but the victim had noticed that the back of the van was covered in plastic, and so he made his escape. The other victim that managed to escape him was at his apartment when the police entered to arrest McArthur. The victim's family didn't know that he was gay, and texts between the two of them indicated that they intended to keep their interaction a secret. So after Bruce McArthur handcuffed the victim, he placed a plastic bag over his head and taped his mouth. And if the police hadn't have turned up, this would certainly have been another victim of murder. There is evidence that McArthur posed and photographed the bodies after he'd killed them. And when a killer does this, they are showing control, manipulative, they're still interacting with their victim. McArthur shaved the hair and beards of their victims and kept their hair in a plastic bag in his work shed. And this kind of interaction is fairly common with serial killers. They're likely to take some kind of memento that they can then use to relive that event. The photographs of the bodies are also likely to have been used in the same way to allow him to relive that event. By posing the victim in various ways, McArthur is showing control over his victim. And this would probably be an unconscious psychological mechanism of not being able to control his own sexual tendencies and compensating by showing so much control and manipulation over his victims. All of the victims were bound and either stabbed or strangled. One victim was stabbed over 100 times. And this is a very hands-on way of killing, and it takes getting very close to the victim. Stabbing a person this many times suggests a rage attack and overkill. Body parts were dismembered and hidden in various planters. So even after death, even after posing the bodies for photographs, he continued to interact with and control his victims. These were linked to McArthur's landscaping business, and we know that the majority of crime is conducted in normal, everyday activities. The majority of crime is conducted in between normal, everyday activities. Routine activity theory suggests that crime doesn't become a separate facet to a person's life. However, it's integrated within their normal daily activities. And this is shown here in the way that their bodies were disposed of. McArthur used his landscaping business to assist him in disposing of some of the victims' bodies. McArthur is suspected of a number of killings in the 1970s, and I think this is highly likely because most serial killers begin to kill much earlier in life than McArthur did. I do hope that you found this video interesting and insightful. Take care of each other and always inform another person if you arrange to meet somebody who you don't know. Always arrange to meet in a public place. Just because somebody seems nice doesn't mean that they are, unfortunately. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.